Hi, I'm Tony Bowen and welcome to my Corn Country Rails N-Scale layout. In the last year I've had quite a few new subscribers to my YouTube channel and I certainly appreciate that. And the questions that I get or the commentary once in a while will be, will you ever do an overview of your railroad for us? Well, I did one several years ago when I first started construction on that, and so it's about time for new subscribers and that to kind of know a little bit background on the layout and that. So that's what this video is primarily about, is kind of take an overview of the whole layout. So I hope you'll stay tuned as I take you on a tour of the layout. My layout is housed in the basement in a room that is about 15.5 feet by 24. That's just the size of the room itself. The layout is roughly 12 by 18 feet and it is double deck. The benchwork is only a foot wide except for inside corners where it tends to stick out a little bit. And I have a narrow walkway. This is kind of the pinch point of the layout between this side of the fascia here to the left and the right. I try to keep most of my walkways 36 inches. This one narrows down to about 30. However, it's also a spot where there's not a lot of work or operations on either side, so it's pretty much kind of a just walk-through area. And so the layout, as I said, is double deck. It kind of folds over onto itself. So kind of in the center of the room, I have this area where it can have an operator kind of just here by themselves, with just kind of a stubbed in peninsula that comes just back out and around. I have my library stuff over here, and the rest of the layout just comes back in this area. So I have tried to utilize as much of the space as I can in the room and try to also get as much running time for the train as possible. The layout itself is powered by an NCE DCC system, and I have the Pro Cab with the radio controlled. And so a lot of times this is what I will use when I'm operating, because there's too many functions on here for somebody who's unfamiliar with the railroad. I don't want them to come in and accidentally say, hey, I deleted all the consist, is that okay? No, that's never going to be okay. And so a lot of times for operating purposes, this is kind of the throttle that I'll keep my hands on, or I'll just tuck away into a drawer. Most time for my operators, if they come, if they use their own throttles, whether it be the Pro Cab or be the Power Cab, those work great. Those can be plugged in, they can sync up to my radio control. The other throttles I really like though for operations for my crew are just going with the Cab 6s. And I have a handful of Cab 6s that are tethered, and I also have some that are radio controlled. And they like these because they're nice to have in your hand, very easy to kind of wheel around the knob with the thumb, easy access for directions and that. So Cab 6s are really great for operating purposes. On the layout itself, I roughly have 200 feet of mainline track that's exposed. The bottom deck is about 100 feet. The top deck is about 100 feet. But then by the time you add in the helix, some reverse kind of tracks that go back to the helix that are unseen, and then the staging area, I have almost another 115 feet in track there. So roughly about 350 feet, or 315 feet, excuse me, roughly of just main line by the time a train would navigate the lower deck, the helix staging area, and then the upper deck. On an average for the typical speed that I run trains, it's not uncommon for a train to take about 35 minutes to do kind of the full loop of the layout. During an operating session, obviously those times are increased because it's a single mainline track. So a lot of times opposing traffic will be sitting in sidings, waiting on dispatcher to kind of release trains for movement and that. And so that was the one thing for my previous layout that I really wanted that operating time when operators were out there on the railroad to be extended. And so, you know, my last layout, we had a great time. We would run trains, but in 20 minutes, it'd be like, okay, I'm done with the session. And that just wasn't enough. And so here, if you get even through the lower deck in 20 minutes of real time, you're doing well. Most of the time, that just is not the case. To add to the realism of operating sessions, we do have a regular train lineup with crews, but also we have a timetable that we follow and dispatchers that, you know, run the railroad as according to the timetable and that. And so that really adds some realism to the railroad. During a typical operating session, already made trains start up here in the staging area. This is not an operating yard. This is trains that the waybills have already been turned. These trains are all ready to go in or out. And so this upper deck is about 12 inches wide and about 16 feet long. However, down below is our staging yard that is operational in the fact that as trains come in, waybills are turned, trains are made up. This yard roughly holds about 350 cars. I've had at one time all of the cars on my railroad in this yard, and I still had capacity for more. And so we have some tracks in the back with like the RS3s or the Northern Pacific FTs and that. Those are trains already made up for the next session. This yard here in the front where the Northwestern engines are, and then a couple rows of cars beside it. These are cars that the next time we have an operating session, the person who's in charge of the yard will basically be sorting those cars as to what their next destination is to go out of this yard. And then we also have some free tracks here, these 4 tracks in the foreground of just room for other cars as they come in. Something I added just a year or so ago was where we see that lone caboose, kind of a caboose and passenger car track. And then I have just some extra power, whether it be foreign power, whether it be some friends of mine that have locomotives that they store here, just some place to put those. And then obviously we've got the 6-turn helix that takes trains from the lower deck to the upper deck. And the top of the upper deck also has an additional siding, which sometimes works out really well for a meet back here. At 3 different locations in my train room, I have fast clocks. This one happens to be in our staging area. It is a 3-to-1 fast clock. My crews and I had used a 4-to-1, but we just felt that 15 minutes equals 1 hour went a little too fast. So when we used the 3-to-1, where 20 minutes equals 1 day, that seemed to work a little bit better. And so we use our fast clocks during operating sessions. And then right below the fast clock is how I have the power districts and where they're basically to and from. And so I kind of know where, if there's ever a short of that, where that power district is, or if there's a case that I'm doing some work on a power district, that it can kind of just come right off the layout and have no power going to it. And so this has been a really handy. Essentially, the power districts are broken up where there's 2 power districts in the upper deck, 2 power districts in the lower deck, and that has seemed to supply enough protection for shorts and anything for the layout. So I've been really happy with this. So now, just a tour of the railroad, of where trains basically go to and from on my layout. During a typical session, if you had a train that was leaving my easternmost part of the layout, which is Silvis, Illinois, and heading west, you start off on the upper deck of the layout. You come through what is basically the Silvis staging yard, down to the main line, and you start going downward on the helix. When you come out, you'll be out in the layout room. As a train comes off the helix, it comes behind this kind of hidden area of the layout. And goes through just a little portal right behind that grain elevator and does a loop and comes out here. And the whole reason for kind of this false area where the backdrop comes out on the top and the bottom is that my electrical panel is back there. So it is just a big enough area that I can pull up the railroad skirting. And if I need to pop up there to have access to my breaker box, I can. The other reason I did that is on my last layout, I had about 34 feet of track that were hidden behind a backdrop. And I noticed as there would be derailments back there, I'd have to get on a stool, I'd have to reach for cars, and then all of a sudden I'd get that lower back pain. And I thought, you know, as I get older, that's not going to get better. So having the track back here where it's very easy for me to reach, but yet kind of concealed where you don't see it, is great. And obviously as I start planting trees back in there, that area of that track being back behind there is just going to be more and more disguised. So it works very effective that I can reach that track, but when it's just like this, I don't have to get on that stool and reach those. And I did basically the same thing for the upper deck. The upper deck, where the track goes back behind these trees, goes through that backdrop and comes up. Well, if we were to look back behind there, there's that track that comes from the upper part of the helix back there. So as a train would exit the helix, come behind that kind of backdrop area, it comes out, and its first town that it hits is Homestead, Iowa. And so Homestead is a very small town. It has a passing siding, it has a grain elevator, it has a coal and kind of fueling service, and then just a feed and seed store. Homestead also has a pretty long siding, and I did that on purpose so that if a train basically had to be held here while something was coming down the helix, that this siding is a little bit longer, being able to hold that train. As a train leaves Homestead, the track goes back to single main line again, goes behind my trailer park that's in development, some roadside areas that aren't developed yet. I'd like to get some roadside vegetable stands, things like that. And the track just slowly continues to go upgrade. It crosses over the Milwaukee Road, and the Milwaukee Road, I also extended a little mirror back there, so it looks like that track just continues on and on. But remember, this is only 12 inches in depth, so that piece of track is only 12 inches long, but hopefully that mirror gives that illusion that track continues on and on. So the train continues on its journey from Homestead, kind of out in the Iowa countryside, going by the soybean fields, until it reaches its next town, which is going to be South Amana, Iowa. At South Amana is, or Amana in general, is pretty well known for kind of their woodworking furniture. And so I'm hoping to find a kit someday that kind of gives that feel of a Amana Mill, a woodworking furniture store going in that spot. South Amana is pretty small in the fact that there's just a spur that comes off the main line that services a grain elevator, and then it can also service the backside of the depot for any type of baggage or things like that that need to be unloaded at the depot. South Amana also has a passing siding. It's not very long, about engine and 20 cars can fit in the siding nicely. And so today we've got just a small Milwaukee train that is parked there on the passing siding at South Amana. As we continue, we go along kind of our wheat field, our corn fields, to the end of the siding as the train will make its way into Marengo. On the way to Marengo, there's these nice little deck bridges. Won't necessarily be a creek or that, but more of a kind of a tuft area with some pastures, some grass tufts, cows and that. Maybe a little trickle of, some marshy area, but not so much a river or a creek or that, just kind of a pasture area. Main line sweeps around the bend of the small peninsula and into Marengo. At Marengo, during an operating session, there's usually a person just running a switch engine here. There's a lot of industries here. There's Iowa Valley Canning. There's a John Deere implement store. There's the Iowa County Highway Department. We have Iowa Electric Power Company. We have a small engine house for the switch engine that's parked here. We have what is going to be a Swift plant. Now the Swift plant in Marengo only processed poultry. So chickens, turkeys, things like that. We have a small track there for the depot. In the foreground, we've got the main line and a passing siding. We have a bulk oil fuel dealer. And then a grain elevator. So that's the town of Marengo. And then the tracks kind of narrow right back down into the main line. As we leave Marengo, we're continuing west. We have Highway 6 here in the foreground and the main line in the background. It sweeps around a curve here. There'll be a farmstead or some kind of farm scene in this big open area right now. It's kind of just a blank canvas right now. Train slowly makes its climb up grade, levels off, and we hit the town of Ladora, Iowa. So Ladora, we're going to have kind of a maintenance away area here for the track gangs. We have a spur right here on the front that goes down grade, that services the farm service fertilized plant, and then we have another implement store. Back on the main line, we have a passing siding. This one is pretty lengthy, can hold about a 24-car train. And then we have the main line right up to the depot. Track that breaks off, goes behind the depot. There's the town of Ladora that still continue to be developed. A grain elevator here. And then also a feed and seed store. And then it tapers down to the passing siding and then back out to the main line. As we leave Ladora, main line makes its way up grade again, going by some marshy area and soybean fields. Still a few little farmsteads under development here. and it sweeps around the large peninsula at the end. This area here is work under development. This is going to be something I'm going to hit pretty hard as far as the styrofoam and getting things in place when I get back from the N-Scale convention. And so it is pretty much a almost 10-foot run of blank canvas just ready to be worked on. Most of it will be farmland in the background, the tracks cutting down the middle, and then right parallel to the tracks will be Highway 6. It'll slowly kind of incline, sweep around, and then go across this bridge that's Highway 6 while the tracks go into the lower staging area. As a train comes into the staging area, the main line just comes right along, and we hit the switch into Carnforth Yard. The train at that point can either go into the yard, or it can stay on the main line and continue following a passing siding that we call Victor, that is about 30 car lengths, and parallels the yard and goes right up the helix. The train comes in the yard. If it is a an operating session, they work in association with the yard master then for making up a new train and doing their setouts and that. So train would just go either on the main line there in the back, or if it came through the yard, once its work is done, it would go down the ladder track and back out onto the main line. The main line just swoops around, and I know it's really dark, but basically as it curves around, it's already starting that curve for the first rung of the helix. And in this case, it's going to be the inside track for going upward to the very top. As I said earlier, when that train would come out of that helix on the upper ring, it kind of falls behind the kind of a hidden backdrop area behind these trees. Behind that backdrop, it kind of houses my utility cabinet, and it's going to come out right here. Main line's going to come out underneath the Camelback Bridge, through some tree areas, another little field area, and it makes its way to the town of Brooklyn. Brooklyn is a pretty good sized town. During an operating session, we also have a small crew here that does the set outs for the train. So we have a lumber yard, we have the 5-Star Manufacturing Plow Company, we've got a coal elevator, we've got just our little spot for the engine that works the area up here at Brooklyn. We've got downtown Brooklyn with the depot, depot track for express cars. Go over the crossing here. We have what will be a fertilizer plant over here. Then we have our grain elevator in Brooklyn. A small Kent feed store here. And then we've got a bulk oil facility also. Brooklyn also has a pretty long siding. The siding from here to the depot holds about 24 cars. On the other side of the depot, stretching over here, can hold about another 15. Except we usually use this side over here for those cars that have already been pulled and are ready to be picked up, where the other part of the siding we use for regular trains that need to stop. Kind of like at Homestead, the reason this siding is up here and longer is, once again, this is kind of your last point before you hit the single track of the helix. And if the siding at the top of the helix is occupied, this is kind of a nice reserve spot for a second train to sit and rest until it gets clearance to leave. So as we leave Brooklyn, we kind of sweep around here, and I've got this open area. At first I was thinking, oh, I'm going to put a field here. And then I saw a couple neat articles on the Blair Line Drive-In Theater, and I thought, you know, that would be so fun to build one of those. So I'm really kind of contemplating that the drive-in theater might go here with the screen and the parking lot and that. And then obviously if there's any little area left, then there might be a small field off to the side. So the tracks swing around here. We have a creek, and to be quite honest, I've read so many articles about different types of water in that now I'm just kind of hesitant on what kind of water I want to use. So other than pouring some water in and putting some tree limbs and a little base, this creek area is almost ready to go. On the other side of it, I've got the field, but I don't have anything planted yet. As we continue on, for the time I model, Highway 63 used to go over the tracks, and so this is kind of a little view block from Brooklyn to our next town that we go into, which is Malcolm. If you went to Malcolm today, this is now a grade crossing, but I kind of like that idea of using that viaduct as kind of a little bit of a divider. Malcolm, I've got some plans for a couple buildings to go back there. Basically just kind of the downtown backs of buildings for Malcolm. We got the depot here with siding, and then just a track that kind of breaks off that goes to the grain elevator at Malcolm. We've got a small warehouse here. Some open real estate for maybe some smaller structures. Another little lumber facility. And then a fertilized plant here. And then obviously the passing siding and main line tie back in together. And you start leaving the town of Malcolm. The train on the kind of stub end peninsula starts working upgrade, and so it's just basically Iowa countryside. I did have to add a one-room schoolhouse here. Obviously, any of you that know me, or if you don't know me, you're going to soon know a little bit about me. I'm a second grade elementary school teacher, and so I wanted to have a little school there. I need to find some swing sets and things like that to put out there. So got our schoolhouse there. Tracks continue on. We got a little farmstead here. Scene that's still not quite all done yet, but still work in progress. Tracks kind of sweep around. We've got a hay field, and some hay bales out there. Our beekeepers up there. We have another cornfield being planted here, but this cornfield is a little bit larger, and I have to stand on a stool to start planting, and so I can plant about a row or two, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, my feet are hurting. That's about enough. We have a Christmas tree there. My youngest daughter likes to come down and, you know, hide stuff on the layout and see if Dad notices. I noticed. The tracks swing around, and we have the town of Ascalon. And Ascalon's going to be kind of a town that's, well, kind of dried up. And so I'm planning on putting maybe a elevator here that's no longer functioning. Obviously the depot has seen its better days. It's been boarded up. I got to get that bulk oil tank kind of right in front of the depot. I also hope to add a semi-4 to it. So this depot has seen better days. The track behind basically is kind of stubbed where it goes nowhere anymore, but I like this because there's times we you don't have to shove some cars in there. And so we've got the main line and the passing siding. And just like the depot, I need to do the same to the tower, kind of, board it up and rough it up a little bit. So the main line continues to keep swinging on along with the passing siding following it. Now we do have a track here that makes a pretty drastic downgrade climb. And this track here, basically it goes to kind of a salvage yard. And I'm hoping to find like a Monroe Models, Quonset hut building to kind of fit back in that facility, have some scraps or piles of scrap and junk just around here. Got a little SW1 that I painted up a couple years ago, kind of as their power down here if they need to move GONs around or push them up the hill for the main line trains and that. So this is kind of a little industry of its own. But up on the main line, we've got our main line and passing siding, and they tie into each other as they continue their way west. And so as they continue west, they go by another farmstead. Kind of a sweeping curve that kind of sticks out. And then goes across the bridge and then goes back behind the Dairy King, the Sunset Motel, people mooning us at the pool, and then comes back. And I've got a lot of open canvas areas here in Grinnell. A lot of different thoughts. I have a structure kind of built up that I thought maybe a bowling alley, but now I'm not even sure if that's going to go there, if there's going to be maybe some other buildings. So the main line comes down, they hit the yard limit sign. We have our used cars. We start getting some downtown streets of Grinnell. Hildebrandt Shoes, York Lumber, another downtown street, Crossover, and the Emmons St. L tracks and the Rock Island. Emmons St. L went obviously north-south, and the Rock Island went east to west. And so someday I also have to scratch build myself Grinnell Depot to go here. The tracks continue west, kind of our little freight station. And now we go around the curve here of the Upper Peninsula. We have Medusa Concrete. And then the passing siding can either connect right back into the main line or can go right down the yard throat and ladder tracks. So we have the Grinnell Yard in the front. Over by the tower we have the track that services the Medusa Concrete, the Grinnell Glove Factory, we have the Grinnell icing platform, and Grinnell also had a Swift plant that processed poultry. At the end of the Grinnell Yard, then we have just a small engine facility, one stall, and the fueling service. And then through that backdrop portal, it goes right into the upper staging again. And as trains would leave Grinnell, they would come down just the slight grade. And then we would consider this end of the upper staging our westernmost terminal, which would be Des Moines. After a train is parked here, its waybills are usually turned, and then it is ready for the next operating session. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour of the layout and kind of a recap and some information about the layout. If there's something that raises some questions, please leave comments, send me a question or email or that. I'd be glad to respond to them. There's a lot of railroad here for one person sometimes, and the things I cover may not be the things that you at home watching this might say, hey, I have a question about this. So please reach out to me. I'd be glad to respond to you. I try to be pretty timely about that. So hope you've enjoyed it. Have a great summer. I hope in the next few days to do kind of a little intro as I make my way to the N-Scale convention in Chicago. And obviously, after I come back from that convention, you can look for probably a series of day-by-day events that I saw there also. So take care and hope to talk with you soon. Thank you. Bye.